AITA for telling my friend I wouldn't support her if she left her husband over a disagreement. So this story involves my best friend, Emily, and her husband, David. We've known each other for about 10 years, and Emily and I have been through a lot together. She's the kind of person who will drop everything to be there for you. No questions asked. I try to do the same for her. For the most part, Emily and David's marriage has seemed pretty solid, but recently, things have been a little rocky. A few months ago, Emily started expressing concerns about their relationship. Nothing major at first, just little complaints that seemed like normal marriage stuff. She mentioned that David had been spending a lot of time at work, and when he was home, he was distracted and distant. She also told me that they hadn't been intimate in a while, which I thought was strange, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. I just assumed it was a phase and things would work themselves out. About a month ago, however, Emily called me late one night, and her voice was shaky. She told me that she was seriously considering leaving David. According to her, she had been feeling emotionally neglected for a while, and no matter how much she tried to communicate her feelings to him, he wouldn't take her seriously. She also said that during a recent argument, David told her that he wasn't interested in working on things anymore, and that he didn't think therapy would help. That hit her hard. Emily told me she had already started making plans to move out, and she seemed resolute. But I was caught off guard. I had always known David as a loving and responsible partner, so I was skeptical that things had deteriorated to this point. I asked her if she had spoken to him about how she was feeling and if there was any chance of salvaging the marriage before making such a huge decision. She said she had, but he kept brushing it off. "It's just a rough patch," he kept saying. Emily felt like she was doing all the emotional labor in the relationship, while David was just coasting along, not acknowledging her feelings. I listened to her vent and reassured her that I'd support whatever decision she made, but I did express concern about the long-term consequences of ending the marriage. They had been together for almost 7 years, and while I understood that emotional neglect could be painful, I didn't want her to make a rash decision without giving it more thought. At this point, I felt it was important to speak honestly with Emily, so I told her that while I would always support her as a friend, I couldn't fully back her decision to leave David. I explained that I believed in working through issues, especially in a marriage, and that breaking up over a communication problem without trying absolutely everything felt like a step backward. I didn't want her to regret a decision she hadn't given her all to. I also mentioned that I was concerned about how this might affect her, especially emotionally. Emily has always struggled with self-esteem, and she had a history of jumping into relationships too quickly after ending one. I worried that a divorce would make her feel even more isolated and would only amplify her insecurities. I told her that maybe some space, counseling, or even just a good conversation with David could help, but I didn't believe leaving was the only solution. She wasn't happy, but I felt like there had to be another way to address the situation. Emily wasn't happy with what I said. She got really quiet on the phone, and then she asked me if I was taking David's side. I told her no, but I had concerns about the finality of a decision like divorce, especially if they hadn't tried everything to fix things. That's when things really got tense. Emily accused me of not understanding how she felt, saying that I didn't know what it was like to feel emotionally drained by someone who wasn't even trying to meet you halfway. I was hurt by her words, but tried to stay calm, telling her that I did understand, but I didn't want her to make a decision she would regret later. After that conversation, we didn't talk for a few days. She was upset, and I was just trying to respect her space, but I also felt like I couldn't sit back and just tell her what she wanted to hear. I called her the next week, and we spoke about it again. Emily said that she was still planning on leaving David, and she even had an apartment lined up. I tried to gently push for more details, like whether she had tried couples counseling or whether she felt she had exhausted all options, but she didn't want to hear it. She told me that if I wasn't going to support her decision, then maybe we shouldn't talk about it anymore. Now, I'm feeling conflicted. On one hand, I understand that Emily feels hurt and frustrated, and I don't want to invalidate her feelings. But on the other hand, I still feel like she's rushing into this decision and could benefit from taking more time to think things through. I've known David for a long time, and while he's not perfect, he's always been kind to her. He's not a bad person, and I really don't think he's trying to hurt her. The whole situation just feels like a breakdown in communication, and I'm worried that Emily is giving up too easily. Since then, our friendship has been strained. We've barely spoken, and when we do, it's mostly small talk. I still want to be there for her, but I don't know if I'm in the wrong for expressing my concerns the way I did. I've always tried to be a good friend to her, but now I wonder if I should have just stayed silent and supported her decision, even if I didn't agree with it. So, AITA for telling my friend I wouldn't support her if she left her husband over a disagreement? Or should I have just backed her up? No questions asked? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more awesome videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. Thanks for your support. AITA for not letting my sister move in with me after she kicked out her husband. I, 28F, live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in a fairly expensive city. My sister, Beth, 32F, is married to Tom, 34M, and they have been together for about 5 years. Over the last couple of years, I've been hearing more and more about their issues. They've had constant fighting, and to be honest, I've been avoiding both of them because it just feels like every conversation turns into a complaint about the other person. But I've always tried to stay neutral and be supportive of my sister since I know she's had a tough time. A few weeks ago, Beth called me in a panic. She told me that Tom had done something unforgivable and she was thinking of leaving him. I had no idea what had happened, but she wouldn't give me any details. I tried to be understanding, but I could tell she was really upset. Then, a few days later, she called again and told me that she had kicked Tom out of the house and wanted to move in with me until she figured out what to do. I was a bit taken aback. First of all, she didn't give me any warning or ask if it was okay. I've always had an open-door policy with her, but it's different when you're talking about living together for an indefinite period of time. I've never had a roommate in my adult life, and honestly, I'm not the type of person who thrives in shared living situations. I like my space, and I don't want to deal with constant tension. I told her I needed to think about it, but I didn't give her a direct answer right away. I asked her what had happened with Tom, but she still didn't want to tell me any details. She just kept saying that she couldn't live with him anymore, and she needed somewhere to stay for a while. A few days later, she called again, sounding more desperate. She told me that she didn't have anywhere else to go, and she needed to stay with me for at least a couple of weeks while she figured things out. At this point, I was feeling overwhelmed and frustrated. It wasn't just the idea of having her live with me that bothered me, but also the lack of transparency. I didn't understand why she couldn't just talk to me about what had happened and why she was so unwilling to be open about the situation. After some thought, I told her that I didn't think it would be a good idea for her to move in with me. I explained that I value my privacy and that I wasn't in a position to have someone else living with me long term. I also mentioned that I didn't feel comfortable taking her in without knowing more about what was really going on with her marriage. I told her that I wanted to help, but I didn't think living together was the best solution. I suggested that she look into staying with a friend or finding a temporary rental. She was really upset, and I could hear the hurt in her voice. She accused me of not caring about her and said that I was being selfish. She told me that I should be there for her during a difficult time, especially since she was going through a breakup. I tried to explain that I wasn't refusing to help, but I just couldn't have her live with me. I suggested that we could talk things through and figure out other ways I could support her. Since then, things have been tense between us. She hasn't spoken to me much, and when she does, it's mostly passive-aggressive comments about how I'm choosing to stay out of it and how I'm not being a good sister. Our family has been on her side, and they all think I'm being too harsh and unsympathetic. My parents called me to tell me that I should be more understanding, especially since Beth is in a tough spot. They think I should let her stay with me, even if it's only temporary. They said that if I were in her shoes, I'd want my sister to help me out. I get that she's going through a rough time, but I still feel like my boundaries should be respected. I've been clear with her that I'm willing to offer emotional support, but I can't offer her a place to stay. I don't feel comfortable with the idea of her moving in, especially without knowing what's really going on between her and Tom. It just feels like a huge responsibility that I'm not ready to take on. Now, I'm questioning if I made the right choice. I feel like I'm being painted as the bad guy in the situation, and it's starting to affect my relationship with my family. But at the same time, I don't think I should have to compromise my own comfort and well-being for someone else's crisis. AITA for refusing to let my sister move in with me? AITA for not wanting to forgive my sister after she stole from me? 28M, have an older sister, Rachel, 34F, who I've always had a complicated relationship with. Growing up, she was the perfect child, and I was often the one left in her shadow. My parents were always praising her achievements, while I felt like I had to fight for every bit of attention. Despite that, I've always tried to be close to her, and in adulthood, we had an okay relationship. It wasn't perfect, but we maintained a bond until recently. I had been saving up for a while to buy a car. I had a small amount of money set aside, but I was waiting for a bonus from work to really be able to afford something decent. This was a big deal for me. I was relying on that bonus to secure a reliable vehicle that I could use for both commuting and personal use. Cars are expensive, and I knew that if I didn't get a good deal, I could be stuck with something unreliable. I kept this plan to myself for the most part, only telling a few close friends and family members. I didn't think it was necessary to announce it to everyone. My sister Rachel, however, knew about it because we'd been talking about cars for a few months leading up to this. She had recently bought a new car herself and knew I was looking to upgrade. She also knew that the bonus I was waiting on would make or break my plan. A few weeks ago, I received the bonus I was waiting for. It wasn't a massive amount, but it was enough to get a good used car. I was ecstatic because this was going to be my first major purchase on my own, and I was proud of how hard I worked to get there. I had been budgeting, saving, and working long hours to make it happen, and it felt like everything was finally coming together. The same day I received the bonus, I went over to my parents' house for a family dinner. Rachel was there, and I mentioned that I had gotten my bonus and was planning to put it toward the car I'd been eyeing. Rachel seemed genuinely happy for me, but as the evening went on, I started to notice something strange. She was asking a lot of detailed questions about my savings, how much the car I was looking at would cost, and how much the bonus was. She even asked how much money I had set aside outside of my bonus for this purchase. I thought it was odd, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Later that week, I went to the bank to withdraw a portion of the money from my account to start car shopping. The transaction was a simple one, just moving some of my savings into a separate account to keep it organized for the purchase. I thought it was a smart move, as I didn't want to risk spending the money by accident. However, when I checked my account a few days later, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. A significant portion of the money I had saved, several $1,000s, was missing. I was in shock. I checked every transaction, thinking I had made a mistake, but the money had been withdrawn in too large amounts over the course of a few days. I had no idea what had happened, and there was no sign of any unauthorized transactions. I knew I hadn't made the withdrawals, so I started thinking about who could have taken the money. I wasn't the type of person to leave cash lying around or make impulsive withdrawals, and my bank was adamant that no one had accessed my account information in any way. After going over the timeline, the only person I could think of who would have had access to my bank account details was Rachel. She knew about my savings, and she knew I was going to use that money for the car. I had a sinking feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to dismiss the thought as paranoia, but when I talked to Rachel a few days later, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She acted normal at first, asking how I was doing and if I had bought the car yet. But when I asked if she had any idea what might have happened to my savings, she suddenly went quiet. There was a long pause before she finally responded, saying she didn't know anything about it. I felt a knot form in my stomach, and I asked her directly if she had taken any money from my account. She denied it, and I didn't have any solid evidence to prove otherwise. But I couldn't shake the suspicion. The next few days were a blur of confusion and frustration, but eventually, I decided to confront her more directly. I went to her house, sat down, and asked her again. This time, she broke down. She admitted that she had taken the money. Apparently, Rachel was going through some financial issues herself. She had been struggling with debt and needed money urgently, so she decided to take the funds from my account without asking. She said that she was desperate and thought she could pay it back before I even noticed. Rachel apologized profusely, saying she didn't mean to hurt me and that she had been too embarrassed to ask for help. She promised she would pay me back every penny. I was stunned. I didn't know how to react. I felt betrayed, hurt, and confused all at once. I had worked so hard for that money, and it wasn't just about the amount. It was the principle of it. Rachel had taken something that wasn't hers without asking, something that I was relying on for a huge milestone in my life. She had crossed the line, and I didn't know if I could ever forgive her for it. I told her I needed some space to think, but she insisted on paying me back immediately. She even offered to sell her car to make up for it. I told her I didn't care about her selling her car. I didn't want her to make it right by doing something drastic. I just wanted her to understand how much this had hurt me. Since then, I've been torn. Rachel has been apologizing nonstop and says she feels terrible about what she did. She started paying me back, but every time I see her, I feel angry and disappointed. I don't know if I can ever fully trust her again. The worst part is that, despite all of her apologies, I don't feel like she truly understands the depth of her betrayal. She's focused on how sorry she is, but I can't help feeling like she took advantage of me when I was at my most vulnerable. So, AITA for not wanting to forgive my sister after she stole from me? Or should I be more understanding, since she's trying to make things right? AITA for not letting my brother's girlfriend stay at my house after she was kicked out of his apartment? I, 29F, live in a small townhouse in a city that's known for being fairly expensive. I've always enjoyed living alone, and I've worked hard to create a comfortable and peaceful space for myself. I've been saving up for years to buy a house, so I take pride in the fact that I've been able to live independently in a place I really like. I've got a solid job, a steady routine, and I don't usually invite a lot of people over unless I'm comfortable with them. My brother, Adam, 27M, has been in a serious relationship with his girlfriend, Emma, 26F, for about 2 years now. At first, I didn't have much to do with Emma, but over time, I started to get to know her. She's nice enough, though I've always felt like she's a little clingy and tends to lean on Adam a lot, which I'm sure is fine for them. But I'm the kind of person who likes my space. I've never really had a problem with her, but I also don't get super involved in their relationship. We don't have the closest sibling dynamic, but we get along just fine. A couple of weeks ago, Adam called me up and asked if I could do him a favor. He told me that Emma had gotten into a huge argument with her landlord, and the situation had escalated to the point where she was being kicked out of her apartment. I could hear the frustration in his voice as he explained that he wanted to help her, but he didn't have enough room in his own apartment to let her move in temporarily. I was immediately put off. I get that it's a bad situation for Emma, but the first thing that came to mind was that this sounded like a huge inconvenience for me. Adam asked if I could let Emma stay with me for a little while until she figured things out. At first, I wasn't sure what a little while meant, but Adam reassured me that it would only be for a couple of weeks, maybe a month at most. He said she was looking for a new place and that this would just be a temporary arrangement. I told Adam I'd have to think about it. I'm someone who values their privacy, and while I've let friends stay with me for short periods, I've never had someone live with me full time, and certainly not someone I don't know as well as I know my brother. Plus, Emma and I don't have the type of relationship where I feel super comfortable inviting her to stay in my personal space. But I didn't want to be the person who says no outright, especially since Adam was so clearly trying to help his girlfriend, so I agreed to think about it. I spent a couple of days mulling it over, and the more I thought about it, the more I started to feel uncomfortable. I didn't know Emma that well, and while I know she's had some problems with her landlord, I didn't feel comfortable opening my home to her for an unknown amount of time. I'm just not the type of person who is good with having others in my space for extended periods. I value my routine and my privacy, and I wasn't sure I could handle the potential stress of having Emma living here. I decided to call Adam back and tell him how I was feeling. I told him that I didn't feel comfortable letting Emma stay at my house. I explained that I had a small place, and it would be difficult for me to accommodate her, especially given that we don't know each other that well. I also told him that I wasn't sure how long she would need to stay, and I didn't want to get into a situation where I was stuck with a long-term house guest. Adam was really upset when I told him no. He kept asking why I couldn't just be there for Emma during a difficult time. He said it wasn't like I had to do much. Emma could just sleep on the couch, and that would be fine. He argued that it would only be for a short while, and that I was being selfish by not helping her out. He said that I was overthinking the situation and that I should be more supportive of him and his relationship with Emma. I tried to explain my perspective, but Adam didn't seem to understand. He kept saying that it wasn't a big deal and that I should just let Emma stay with me for a little while. He even started guilt-tripping me, saying that I'd want his help if I were ever in a tough situation. It was clear to me that he was frustrated, and I could tell he was disappointed in me for not offering to help. But the more he pushed, the more I started to feel like I was being taken advantage of. I've always been supportive of Adam, but I didn't think it was fair for him to expect me to open my home to someone I barely knew and who didn't really have any prior claim to it. After that conversation, Emma reached out to me directly. She was polite, but seemed a bit upset that I hadn't agreed to let her stay. She said she understood if I wasn't comfortable with it, but it still felt like there was some underlying tension. She mentioned that she didn't have any other options and was feeling really stressed out about everything. I felt bad for her, but at the same time, I was still firm in my decision. I just wasn't willing to have someone else living in my space, especially for an indefinite period of time. The situation has been really awkward since then. Adam is still upset with me, and it's clear that this has caused some tension between us. He's told me multiple times that he's disappointed in me for not being more understanding and that he thought I would be the type of person to help out family. I get that he's in a tough spot, and I know he wants to help Emma, but I don't think that means I should have to compromise my boundaries. I made it clear that I'm willing to support them in other ways, like helping Emma look for a new place or even offering to let her crash at my place for a day or two, but I just can't have her living here. Now, our relationship is strained, and I feel like I'm being made out to be the bad guy. Our family has also weighed in, with some people saying I'm in the wrong for not offering more support, while others agree that I have the right to say no. I'm torn because I understand both sides, but at the same time, I don't think it's fair for anyone to expect me to change my living situation just because someone else is going through a tough time. AITA for not letting my brother's girlfriend stay at my house after she was kicked out of his apartment. AITA for refusing to let my friend stay with me after she demanded that I let her bring her dog. I, 29M, have a friend, Carla, 28F, who I've known for about 6 years. We met in college and have been through a lot together, from wild parties to serious life moments. Over the years, we've become very close, and while our friendship hasn't always been smooth sailing, we've always managed to work through issues. However, I recently found myself in a situation that has put our friendship to the test, and now I'm left wondering if I overreacted. A couple of months ago, Carla reached out to me about a potential stay at my place. She said she was going through a tough time and needed to move out of her apartment for a while because her landlord was doing some major renovations. I was happy to offer her a place to stay, especially since she'd done the same for me a few times in the past when I was going through some personal issues. But there was a catch. Carla has a dog, Max, who she describes as her emotional support animal. Now, before I go on, I should mention that I'm not a dog person. I grew up with cats and have always been more of a feline person. I have nothing against dogs in general, but I'm just not comfortable with them being around constantly. My apartment is relatively small, and I work from home, so I spend a lot of time here. The thought of sharing my space with a dog who might need constant attention, care, and walks didn't sound ideal to me, but I didn't want to seem unsupportive. I've known Carla for years, and I understand how important Max is to her. Still, I didn't think it was unreasonable to ask her not to bring the dog. I expressed my concerns to Carla when she first mentioned staying at my place. I said I was happy to help her out, but I would prefer if she came without Max. I told her that I wasn't comfortable with dogs in my home, especially in such a small space, and that it could be stressful for both of us, considering my work-from-home setup. I emphasized that I wanted to help, but I needed to make sure the arrangement would work for both of us. Carla wasn't happy with this request. She immediately started insisting that Max was a huge part of her emotional well-being and that she couldn't be without him. She said she'd been through a lot recently, and not having him with her would make the situation even worse. I understood that she was going through a tough time, and I didn't want to invalidate her feelings, but I also had my own needs and limits. We went back and forth about it for a few days, with me trying to stick to my boundaries and Carla trying to persuade me. She told me that she couldn't afford to board Max at a kennel, and that asking a friend to watch him wasn't an option. She even suggested I could just get used to having a dog around for a little while. Eventually, she gave me an ultimatum. Either she brings Max with her, or she finds somewhere else to stay. At this point, I felt like I was being backed into a corner. I hadn't expected her to put me in that position, especially after all the help I had offered. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not caring for her or her emotional needs, but about respecting both of our space. I told her I was willing to help in any other way, but I couldn't make an exception when it came to my living situation. She got upset, and that's when things got really tense. Carla told me that she was hurt by my refusal and that it felt like I didn't care about her well-being. She accused me of being selfish and not understanding her situation. I was taken aback by her reaction because I genuinely thought I was being considerate of both her needs and mine. She said she didn't have anywhere else to go and that I was her last option. It made me feel guilty, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't let someone else's pet change my boundaries. After a long, emotional conversation, Carla finally agreed to stay with a mutual friend, Jenna, who had a larger house and was apparently more open to the idea of having a dog. I was relieved, but also felt bad that the situation had escalated so much. I didn't want to lose a friend over something like this, but at the same time, I knew I had to stand firm in my decision. A few days later, Carla sent me a text saying she was staying with Jenna, but that she was really hurt by my refusal to accommodate Max. She said it felt like I didn't care about her mental health or her well-being. She even implied that I was being unreasonable for not understanding how important Max was to her. I tried to reassure her that I cared about her, but that it wasn't about her dog. It was about my own comfort and my personal boundaries. She didn't seem to respond well to that, and we haven't really talked much since then. Since then, I've been feeling conflicted. I'm still upset that Carla put me in such a difficult position, and I feel like she wasn't willing to see things from my perspective. I understand that Max is important to her, but I also feel like I'm allowed to have my own boundaries. I don't think it's selfish to want my living space to be comfortable for me, especially when I'm the one opening my home to her. I've been trying to figure out whether I made the right call. Maybe I could have handled it differently, but I also feel like I shouldn't have to sacrifice my comfort just to keep a friendship intact. It's been a couple of weeks, and while I've tried reaching out to Carla, she hasn't responded to my messages. Part of me wonders if this is the end of our friendship, and I feel guilty about that. But at the same time, I don't think I should have had to compromise my boundaries to avoid a fight. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend stay with me after she demanded that I let her bring her dog? Or should I have just sucked it up and allowed the dog to stay, even though I wasn't comfortable with it? AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in with me after she lost her job and her apartment? I, 27F, have a pretty solid life. I'm single, live in a decent-sized one-bedroom apartment in a small city, and I enjoy my privacy. I work from home, so I like having a peaceful environment to focus on work and unwind. I'm not a super social person, and I've never really had anyone live with me aside from short-term guests, like family or a close friend who stayed for a couple of days. My apartment isn't huge, but it's mine, and I've worked hard to make it comfortable. My best friend, Sarah, 28F, and I have been close for years. We met in college, and we've been inseparable ever since. We've gone through a lot together, from the highs of graduations and new jobs to the lows of breakups and family drama. She's the kind of person who's always been there for me, and I've always tried to be there for her too. That's why it was so difficult for me when she called me a few weeks ago, asking if she could move in with me. Sarah has had a rough year. She lost her job due to some restructuring at her company, and while she's been looking for work, she hasn't been able to find anything permanent. She was living in an apartment with a roommate, but her roommate recently kicked her out. She called me crying, saying she had nowhere to go and that she'd be homeless if I didn't let her stay with me. She said she was just waiting for a job offer to come through, and once she had one, she would be able to pay me rent and move out within a couple of months. I was caught off guard. I never expected this kind of request from Sarah, especially since I've always been someone who values their space. I told her I needed some time to think about it, because this wasn't a small decision. I also wanted to consider whether it was fair to her or to me, as I know how tough living with someone else can be, especially for an extended period of time. The next day, Sarah called again, sounding desperate. She was really insistent, and she promised that it would only be temporary. She said she wouldn't be a burden and that she would stay in the guest room, keep to herself, and contribute to the household however she could. She also emphasized that this was just a temporary arrangement until she got back on her feet. She made me feel guilty, telling me that I was the only person she could count on. I thought about it long and hard. On the one hand, I really care about Sarah, and I've always been there for her during difficult times. On the other hand, I knew that living together for an undetermined amount of time could put a lot of strain on both of us. I like my routine, my quiet, and my space. I've never had anyone live with me for more than a couple of days, and I wasn't sure I could handle that kind of disruption, even for a friend. Plus, I've been through tough times too, and I know that living with someone when you're both struggling can create a lot of tension. After a lot of consideration, I told Sarah that I couldn't let her move in with me. I explained that I value my personal space, and I wasn't comfortable with the idea of someone living with me long-term, even temporarily. I told her that I didn't think it was the best idea for either of us, and while I would help her in other ways, like offering to help with her job search or helping her find other temporary housing options, I just couldn't have her stay at my place. Sarah was devastated. She was really hurt and accused me of not caring about her. She said that if our roles were reversed, I would expect her to help me, and that she thought we were best friends and that this was what friends do for each other. She even went so far as to say that I was being selfish and that I was putting my own comfort above her well-being. I tried to explain that this wasn't about not caring about her, but more about me not being able to give up my space for that long. I told her that I wasn't sure I could handle the stress of living together, especially with everything else going on in her life. She didn't want to hear any of it and kept telling me how disappointed she was in me. Our friendship has been strained ever since. Sarah hasn't really talked to me much, and when we do speak, it's mostly awkward and tense. I could tell she's still upset with me, and honestly, it hurts. I've tried to reach out, but it feels like she's keeping her distance. Some of our mutual friends have also started to comment on it, asking why I wouldn't let her stay with me. And they all seem to think I should have just helped her out, especially since she's going through such a rough time. I've had people tell me that if she were in my shoes, she would have helped me, so I should have done the same for her. Some of our mutual friends even texted me to say that I was being unreasonable, that Sarah is in a really tough place, and that I should be supporting her more. But then again, I've had other friends say that it's okay for me to set boundaries and that I'm not responsible for her. I'm just feeling torn. I've tried to offer other solutions, like helping her find short-term rentals or helping her connect with people who might have space for her, but she doesn't seem interested. She keeps saying it's either my place or nothing, and that if I truly cared about her, I'd make room for her. I feel guilty, but I also don't think I should be forced to give up my home and my space for someone else, no matter how much I care about them. It's not like I haven't tried to support her in other ways, and I don't think I'm obligated to sacrifice my comfort and mental health just because she's in a tough situation. So, AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in with me after she lost her job and apartment. AITA for not letting my friend stay at my place after her boyfriend broke up with her. I, 29M, have been friends with Jane, 28F, for about 6 years now. We met in college and hit it off instantly. We've been through a lot together, and I consider her one of my closest friends. Over the years, I've seen her go through her fair share of relationships, but for the past 2 years, she's been with her boyfriend, Matt, 31M. They seemed like a good match, and I've always thought they were happy together. A few weeks ago, Jane called me in tears. She told me that Matt had broken up with her. Apparently, they've been having issues for a while, but Jane didn't mention anything about it to me. She said that Matt told her he just wasn't happy anymore and that it wasn't working out. She was devastated and said she had nowhere to go because she had been living with him for the past year. She asked if she could stay at my apartment for a while until she got things sorted out. At first, I was caught off guard. I'm the type of person who values my alone time and privacy. I live in a one-bedroom apartment, and while it's cozy, it's not big enough for 2 people for an extended period. I also don't have a ton of experience with long-term house guests. My place is a sanctuary for me, and I like to keep it that way. I also didn't know what a while would mean. I'm a planner, and the idea of having someone crash at my place for an undetermined amount of time made me anxious. I told Jane I needed some time to think about it. She was understandably upset, and I could tell she was counting on me, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for that kind of responsibility. It's not that I didn't want to help her. I care about her a lot. It's just that I've always been someone who has cherished their space, and I didn't want to throw off my entire routine. Plus, we both know that living with friends can sometimes cause tension, and I wasn't sure if that would be the case for us. The next day, Jane called me again, and I could tell she was desperate. She said she had nowhere else to go, and that she was feeling completely lost without Matt. She told me she wasn't asking for much, just a place to crash while she figured things out. She reassured me that it wouldn't be for long, and that she would pay me rent once she found a job and got back on her feet. She even said she would sleep on the couch to give me space. She sounded so broken and vulnerable, and I really felt for her. But at the same time, I still wasn't sure. I told her that I would help her in any way I could, but that I didn't think I could have her stay at my place. I explained that I valued my privacy and that living with someone else, even for a short time, would be too much for me. I told her I couldn't offer her a long-term solution, but that I was more than willing to help her find somewhere else to stay or help her get in touch with other friends or family who might be able to take her in. She was really hurt. She kept insisting that I was the only person she could rely on, and that if I couldn't even offer her a place to stay during such a difficult time, then maybe I didn't care about her as much as she thought. She told me that I was being selfish and that she had always been there for me when I needed help, so I should do the same for her. I was really torn at that point, but I stuck to my decision. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not caring about her, but rather that I simply couldn't make that kind of sacrifice in my life. Since then, things have been awkward between us. Jane has been distant, and when we do talk, it's mostly about the breakup and her feelings of betrayal. She hasn't really spoken to me about anything else. I've offered to listen to her vent and to help her with practical things like finding a place to stay or helping her look for job opportunities, but she doesn't seem interested in that. She keeps saying that it's not the same as letting her stay with me. I've talked to a few of our mutual friends, and they seem to think I should have let her stay with me. They say that when you're close friends, you should support each other no matter what, and that I'm being unreasonable by not offering her a place to stay. Some have even suggested that I'm being cold-hearted and that it's not a big deal for her to crash at my place for a few weeks. But then I have other friends who think I made the right decision. They say it's okay to have boundaries and that living with someone else, especially during a tough emotional time, could put unnecessary strain on our friendship. They argue that I shouldn't feel obligated to sacrifice my personal space for someone else's crisis, and that I have every right to say no. Now, I'm questioning whether I made the right call. I still feel like I made the right decision for myself, but I also don't want to lose my best friend over this. I've tried to reach out to Jane and let her know that I'm here for her, but she's been distant and short with me. I don't know if things will ever go back to how they were, and I'm starting to feel like I'm in the wrong. AITA for refusing to let my friend stay at my place after her boyfriend broke up with her. AITA for not allowing my friend to borrow my car after she totaled hers. I, 30M, have a close group of friends, and one of them, Megan, 29F, is someone I've known for about 8 years. We met in college and have been through a lot together. Over the years, we've had ups and downs, but we've generally remained close. Megan has always been the kind of person who asks for help when she needs it, and I've always been willing to lend a hand, whether it was for emotional support, helping her move, or just offering advice. But recently, something happened that's made me question whether I've been too lenient with her, and I'm not sure if I was wrong for putting my foot down this time. A few weeks ago, Megan got into a car accident. She wasn't seriously injured, thank God, but her car was totaled. She called me immediately after the accident, clearly shaken up, and I rushed to the scene to make sure she was okay. Her car was in pretty bad shape, but thankfully, she had full insurance coverage, so she wasn't financially liable for the accident, though she had to deal with the stress of it all. I stayed with her for a while, comforting her and making sure she had all the information she needed for the insurance claim. When the dust settled, Megan didn't have a car to get around in, and that's when she asked me for a favor. She said that her car wasn't going to be replaced for at least a week or two because of the insurance process, and she needed a way to get to work in the meantime. She asked if she could borrow my car until hers was fixed or replaced. Now, I don't have the most expensive car, but it's reliable and important to me. I use it for work and everyday errands, so it's not just a luxury item. It's something I need for my day-to-day life. I thought about it for a second, and I knew Megan was in a tough spot. I also knew she had a long commute to work, and I wanted to help her out. But then, I remembered a few things about our past that made me hesitate. For one, Megan had borrowed my car before, and the last time it was a bit of a disaster. A few years ago, she borrowed it for a weekend road trip, and when she returned it, I noticed that there was a large scratch on the side of the car. She hadn't told me about it, and when I asked her what happened, she admitted that she accidentally scraped it against a pole. She apologized, but she never offered to pay for the repairs, and I ended up covering the cost myself. It wasn't a huge amount, but it left a bad taste in my mouth. Another reason I hesitated was that Megan had a history of not taking great care of things that weren't hers. She'd borrowed things from me in the past, whether it was books, clothes, or even my gaming console, and returned them either damaged or in worse condition than when she borrowed them. It wasn't that she was malicious, it just seemed like she had a habit of being careless. I've always been the kind of person who gives people the benefit of the doubt, but after the last incident with the car, I wasn't sure I wanted to risk it again. I've worked hard for what I have, and I didn't want to deal with the stress of potentially dealing with another issue like the scratch on my car. So, I told Megan that I was sorry, but I wasn't comfortable letting her borrow my car. Megan seemed taken aback by my response. She asked me if I was serious, and I explained that I didn't feel comfortable lending it to her, especially given the past history. I told her that I would be happy to help in other ways, whether it was helping her figure out a temporary ride, or even offering to pay for a rental car for a few days. But I just couldn't let her borrow my car again, not after everything that had happened before. At first, she was understanding, but then she started to get upset. She told me that I was being unreasonable and that I was being selfish for not helping her when she needed it most. She said that she had no other options and that she was relying on me. She also mentioned that we were supposed to be friends and that friends should help each other out. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not wanting to help her. It was about protecting my own belongings and being cautious after the last time. She didn't seem to understand. Over the next few days, Megan sent me multiple texts asking if I'd changed my mind. She even said that she was willing to pay me for the use of the car or even give me a deposit to cover any potential damage. But the more she pushed, the more firm I became in my decision. I wasn't going to lend her the car, no matter how many times she asked. Finally, after a week of back and forth, Megan stopped texting me. I thought things had settled down, but then I saw on social media that she had posted a picture of herself with a new car. I didn't know she was planning on getting a new car, but I was glad for her that she had found a solution to her problem. However, the next time we spoke, Megan mentioned it casually, and I felt like there was an underlying tension in her tone. She told me that she had figured it out and didn't need my help anymore. I could tell she was still upset, but she didn't say much else about it. Now, I'm feeling conflicted. I know I did the right thing by setting a boundary, but I'm worried that I might have hurt our friendship beyond repair. Megan hasn't reached out since, and I can't help but wonder if she's angry with me. I feel guilty, but at the same time, I know I had to protect myself and my belongings. I don't think I was being unreasonable, but I'm worried that my decision might have cost me a close friend. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend borrow my car after she totaled hers? Or should I have just sucked it up and helped her out, even if I had reservations? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for not inviting my brother to my birthday party after he insulted my fiancée. I, 30M, have always had a fairly close relationship with my family, especially my brother, Ben, 28M. We grew up together and have always been there for each other, even though we've had our fair share of arguments over the years. Despite some disagreements here and there, I always considered him someone I could count on. Over the past 2 years, I've been in a serious relationship with my fiancée, Emma, 28F. We met through mutual friends, and our relationship has been pretty solid from start. We get along well, share similar values, and I can honestly say she's the best thing to ever happen to me. My family has also been very supportive of our relationship, especially my parents, who adore her. However, my brother has never really clicked with Emma in the way I had hoped. I've never understood it because Emma is kind, caring, and has always gone out of her way to get along with everyone, especially my family. She tries to make an effort with my brother, but for some reason, he's always been distant toward her. He hasn't outright said anything rude, but he's been passive-aggressive at times, which has made things awkward at family gatherings. At first, I thought it was just a phase, but it's been 2 years, and I'm starting to get frustrated. For my birthday this year, I decided to throw a big celebration with close family and friends. I've always loved having a party, and I wanted it to be a fun, relaxed event. I invited all my family members, including Ben and Emma, and I had been planning it for weeks. I made sure to organize everything, so it would be something we would all enjoy. Of course, Emma was going to be there with me, and I was looking forward to celebrating with both her and my family. A week before the party, I went over to my parents' house to discuss some last-minute details with them. My brother was there too, and as we were talking about the party, I mentioned that I was really looking forward to it and that I was excited for everyone to finally have a good time together. Ben immediately made a comment that caught me off guard. He said, "I just hope Emma doesn't ruin the vibe like she did last time." I froze. I wasn't sure what he meant, but it was clear that he wasn't joking. I tried to brush it off and told him that Emma would be there to enjoy the party, and that it wasn't about vibes or anything like that. Ben then went on to make a few more comments about Emma, calling her boring and saying that she wasn't his type of person and that he didn't see the point of having her around at family events. I could feel my blood starting to boil. These comments were not just passive-aggressive anymore. They were outright rude. I told Ben that if he had a problem with Emma, he should have the decency to talk to me directly instead of making snide remarks at family gatherings. Ben's response was that he wasn't going to pretend to like Emma just because I was with her. He said that he didn't have to approve of my relationship, and if I wanted him to be nice to her, then I was the one with the problem. That comment hit me hard. I've always tried to be understanding when it comes to family dynamics, but this was too much. I tried to keep my cool, but I told Ben that if he couldn't act civil around Emma, then maybe it was best he didn't come to the party. Ben's face immediately turned red, and he said I was overreacting. He accused me of taking sides and turning against family just because I was in a relationship. He told me that he didn't want to be forced into an uncomfortable situation, and that if I was going to make him choose between Emma and family, he would choose family every time. I told him that it wasn't about choosing sides, but about mutual respect. I told him that Emma was my fiancée, and that I expected him to treat her with the same respect he would treat any other person, family or not. Ben, however, wasn't having it. He said he didn't want to go to a fake party where he'd have to pretend everything was fine. After that conversation, I was honestly upset. I've been trying to be patient with Ben for a long time, but this felt like a breaking point. I didn't want to force him to go to the party, but I also didn't want someone who was so openly disrespectful to Emma to be there. I talked to Emma about it, and she was incredibly understanding. She told me that she didn't want to be the reason for any family drama, and that if I didn't want Ben to come, she would support my decision. I spent the next few days going back and forth in my head, but in the end, I decided to not invite Ben. It felt like the right decision at the time, considering how he had treated Emma and how he had completely dismissed my feelings about the situation. I sent him a text letting him know that, after our conversation, I didn't think it would be a good idea for him to come to the party. I explained that I was looking forward to celebrating with the people who supported me, and that I didn't want any negativity there. I told him that he was always welcome to come by at another time, but that I was prioritizing peace and respect for my fiancée. Ben didn't take it well. He texted me back, calling me an idiot and accusing me of being weak for letting a woman control me. He said that I was throwing away family for someone who didn't even fit in with us. He said I was being unreasonable and childish, and that if I couldn't see how wrong I was, then maybe I wasn't the brother he thought I was. Since then, I've been feeling a lot of guilt. On the one hand, I don't think I did anything wrong. I've always been there for Ben, and I think I've been patient enough with his behavior toward Emma. But on the other hand, I can't help but wonder if I could have handled it differently. Maybe I could have tried to talk to Ben more about his issues with Emma, or maybe I could have found another way to get him to come without creating drama. I don't know. Our parents have also been caught in the middle. My mom has told me that I should have just let it go and invited Ben anyway, since he's family. My dad, however, agrees that Ben's behavior was unacceptable, but still thinks I could have tried harder to make things work. I feel stuck, and I'm not sure if I made the right call. So, AITA for not inviting my brother to my birthday party after he insulted my fiancée. AITA for asking my brother to leave my house after he brought his girlfriend and her child without asking. I, 32M, have a younger brother, Jack, 27M, who has always been a bit of a free spirit. He's the kind of guy who goes with the flow, doesn't worry too much about plans, and often shows up unannounced at my place or a parent house. It's something I've learned to tolerate over the years, even though it sometimes gets frustrating. For the most part, I've always been patient with him, but recently he crossed a line that left me questioning whether I was being too harsh or if he was being completely disrespectful. A couple of weeks ago, I had some time off from work and decided to use it to relax, catch up on some projects around the house, and enjoy some quiet time. I don't get much time to myself because of my job, so I was really looking forward to having a peaceful few days. My brother, Jack, knew I was off and texted me to ask if I wanted to hang out or catch up. I told him that I was planning to spend a quiet couple of days at home and didn't have any big plans, but I'd be happy to see him later in the week. I made it clear that I needed some time to recharge. The next day, I got a call from Jack, and when I picked up, he told me he was on his way to my house. He didn't ask, he just said, "Hey, I'm heading over now." I was a bit taken aback because I had explicitly told him I was planning to stay in and relax. But I didn't want to sound rude, so I said, "Okay, I'll see you soon." When Jack arrived, he was with his girlfriend, Samantha, and her 5-year-old daughter, Lily. This was the first time I was meeting Samantha and Lily, and I was caught completely off guard. Now, to be clear, I've always been on good terms with Jack's girlfriends, but I didn't know Samantha very well. Jack had only been dating her for a couple of months, and they hadn't really had a chance to spend a lot of time around me yet. As for Lily, I had heard about her, but hadn't had the chance to meet her either. I didn't mind meeting new people, but the situation felt a bit awkward. I wasn't expecting anyone to show up, let alone have them stay over for the day. I asked Jack what the plan was, and he casually told me that they were going to hang out for a while and that they didn't have any other plans. At that point, I started to feel a little uncomfortable. I had no idea they were planning to stay for the day, let alone be there without any prior notice. I was looking forward to my quiet time, and now it felt like that was out the window. I tried to stay calm and make the best of it. I offered them drinks and snacks, but the whole situation just didn't feel right. Samantha was polite, but she seemed a little out of place, and Lily was bouncing off the walls, which made me even more anxious. I had no idea what to do, and I didn't want to make things awkward by asking them to leave. But I was clearly uncomfortable, and it felt like my space was being invaded without any consideration for how I was feeling. After a couple of hours, I politely asked Jack if they had any plans for the day or if they needed to get going. I explained that I'd been really looking forward to some quiet time and needed to get some work done around the house. Jack seemed a little surprised by my request and said, "Oh, I didn't realize you wanted to be alone. We can leave if you need us to." Samantha also seemed a little put off, and I could tell she was starting to get uncomfortable too. Lily, on the other hand, was still running around and playing with some of the toys I had left lying around the house. I tried to suggest that they could stay for a little while longer, but the whole situation just didn't feel right. I felt like I was being too nice and was letting the discomfort build up. Finally, I said, "Look, I think it's best if you guys head out for today. I didn't expect you to bring your girlfriend and her daughter over without checking in first, and I really need some space." I could tell from their reactions that they weren't happy with my request. Jack seemed a bit taken aback, and Samantha looked a little hurt. Jack asked, "Are you serious? It's just for a few hours. We're not causing any trouble." I explained again that it wasn't about them causing trouble. It was about my need for some alone time, which I had clearly communicated earlier. Jack wasn't happy about this and started to argue with me. He said that I was overreacting and that I should have just let them stay and hang out for a bit. He even said that it was rude to kick them out after they had made the effort to come see me. I explained that I didn't mind having them over, but I felt blindsided by the unannounced visit and how they had stayed longer than I had expected. It wasn't just about them being there, it was about the lack of consideration for my needs. Eventually, they left, but the tension lingered. After they left, I felt a little guilty for kicking them out, but I also felt like I had done the right thing. I was really looking forward to some alone time, and it seemed like Jack had taken that for granted. I texted him later that night to apologize for the tension, but I also reiterated that I needed him to respect my boundaries moving forward. Jack hasn't really spoken to me since. He's been distant and hasn't responded to any of my texts. Our parents reached out to me, saying that Jack was upset and felt like I was being too harsh. I should have just gone with the flow and let them stay since it was only for a few hours. I understand the perspective, but I don't feel like I did anything wrong. I was clear about needing space, and I didn't appreciate being blindsided by an unannounced visit that turned into a much longer stay than I had expected. I've been debating whether I should apologize more or if I was completely justified in my actions. I know I could have handled it differently, maybe been more diplomatic, but at the same time, I don't think I was out of line to ask them to leave when I was clearly uncomfortable and had made my need for space clear. So, AITA for asking my brother to leave my house after he brought his girlfriend and her child without asking? Or should I have just gone along with it and dealt with the disruption for a few hours? AITA for not letting my best friend stay at my place after she got evicted? I, 26M, have been best friends with Lucy, 25F, since high school. We've always been there for each other, through breakups, family issues, job struggles, you name it. We've been through thick and thin, and I've always considered her one of the most important people in my life. She's one of those friends who's more like family to me. I also live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, which I've had for about 2 years now. It's a cozy space, but it's all mine, and I've worked hard to make it feel like home. I don't have any roommates, and I really enjoy my solitude and personal space. Recently, Lucy's been going through some tough times. She lost her job about 4 months ago and has been struggling to find a new one. While she's been applying to different places, the job market hasn't been great, and things have been piling up. About a week ago, she called me in tears and told me she had been evicted from her apartment. Apparently, she missed a couple of rent payments due to not being able to find work, and her landlord decided to kick her out. Lucy had nowhere to go, and she asked me if she could crash at my place for a little while. At first, I wasn't sure what to say. I've always been the kind of person who values my personal space. I live alone for a reason. I need my own time to recharge, and the idea of having someone stay with me long-term was a bit overwhelming. I've had guests stay for a couple of nights before, but this was different. Lucy wasn't just visiting. She would need somewhere to stay for potentially weeks or even months while she figured things out. I told her I need to think about it. I didn't want to leave her hanging, but I also wanted to make sure I was making the right decision for myself. She understood, but she was clearly desperate. The next day, she called me again and said she had nowhere else to turn. She asked if I could at least let her stay for a couple of weeks until she got back on her feet. She promised she wouldn't be a burden and would keep to herself as much as possible. She even offered to pay rent, though I told her I didn't expect her to. Still, the idea of her staying with me for an extended period of time made me anxious. I explained that I wasn't sure I could handle having someone living with me, even temporarily. Lucy was upset, but told me she understood. However, she called me again the next day, practically begging me. She told me that she had no family to turn to. Her parents live out of state, and she had already asked them for help, but they couldn't offer anything. She said she had applied for multiple jobs and was waiting to hear back, but the uncertainty of her situation was weighing heavily on her. She said that if I didn't let her stay with me, she didn't know what she would do. I felt terrible, but I still wasn't sure I could say yes. I had a few friends who had lived with me temporarily before, and while they were all great people, I always felt the stress of having someone in my space for more than a few days. I've built my life around my own routine and being alone, and I was worried that having Lucy stay with me would disrupt that. I also feared it might strain our friendship. We've always been close, but living together could bring out new challenges in our relationship that I wasn't sure we could navigate. After thinking about it for a few more days, I called Lucy and told her that I couldn't let her stay at my place. I explained that while I cared about her and wanted to help, I wasn't comfortable with the idea of having someone live with me long-term. I told her that it wasn't about not wanting to support her, but rather that I needed to set boundaries for my own well-being. I offered to help her look for a place to stay, maybe find a temporary rental or help her apply for a few shelters, but I couldn't let her stay in my apartment. Lucy was devastated. She started crying and told me that she felt completely abandoned. She said that I was the only person she could rely on, and that if I couldn't help her out, then I wasn't really her friend. She even said that I was selfish for putting my own comfort above her needs. It felt like a punch in the gut. I tried to explain that it wasn't about her, but about me needing to maintain my own space for my mental health. But she didn't take it well and ended the conversation by telling me I was a disappointment. The next few days were awkward. I reached out to her a few times to see how she was doing, but she didn't respond. She posted a couple of passive-aggressive statuses on social media about fake friends and people who forget where they come from. I could tell she was hurt, and I felt guilty, but I was still convinced that I had made the right decision. It didn't help that some of our mutual friends were also messaging me, saying that I should have helped Lucy out and that I was being heartless. They said that when you're best friends, you have to put each other first, no matter what. But on the other hand, I had a couple of friends who told me I did the right thing and that I wasn't obligated to sacrifice my own peace and comfort for someone else's crisis. After a few more days, I saw Lucy in person at a mutual friends gathering. It was the first time I'd seen her since our conversation. She barely acknowledged me, and when she did, she was cold and distant. I tried to approach her and talk, but she told me she didn't want to talk to me. She said that she didn't need my help anymore and that she had figured things out on her own. I could tell she was still hurt, and I honestly felt like I had lost her as a friend. I've tried to reach out again, but she hasn't responded. It's been a week now, and I'm not sure where we stand. I feel like I did the right thing by setting boundaries, but I also feel like I might have lost someone who's been one of my closest friends. I keep second-guessing myself, wondering if I should have just sucked it up and let her stay for a little while. So, AITA for not letting my best friend stay at my place after she got evicted. AITA for refusing to lend my friend money after she repeatedly asked. I, 28F, have a good friend, Rachel, 27F, who I've known since high school. We've been through a lot together, and I've always considered her one of my closest friends. Over the years, we've had ups and downs, but we've always managed to work things out. Recently, though, I've found myself in a position where I'm questioning whether I did the right thing in refusing to lend her money, and I'm not sure if I was in the wrong. Let me start by giving a little background on Rachel. She's someone who has always struggled financially. She has had a series of unfortunate events in her life, from losing jobs to going through a tough breakup. I've always tried to be there for her, offering emotional support and even helping her out when she needed it, like covering dinner when she couldn't afford it or lending her things she needed temporarily. I've never had an issue with helping her out in small ways, but the financial requests have started to add up, and I've reached a point where I'm no longer comfortable continuing. A few months ago, Rachel approached me asking for a loan. She explained that she was behind on her rent and needed $500 to avoid being evicted. At the time, I didn't have much extra money myself, but I knew that if I didn't help, she might end up in a worse situation. After thinking it over, I decided to lend her the money. I made it clear that I wasn't expecting her to pay it back immediately, but that I would appreciate it if she could pay me back over time. She agreed, and I sent the money. A month went by, and Rachel didn't mention anything about paying me back. I reached out to her to check in, and she said that things were still tight and that she couldn't pay me back yet, but would as soon as she was able to. I told her I understood, but that I really needed the money back soon, especially since I had been living paycheck to paycheck as well. She apologized and promised to pay me back as soon as she could. 2 more months went by with no payment, and Rachel continued to assure me she was doing her best. I was getting frustrated, but I didn't want to push her too hard because I knew how tough things had been for her. However, things started to feel more strained when she asked me for more money. She told me that she was struggling again, this time with medical bills, and asked if I could lend her another $300. I told her that I was not in a position to lend her any more money and that I was still waiting on the $500 she owed me. Rachel seemed a bit taken aback, but didn't argue. She apologized again and said she understood. A few weeks later, she asked me to cover a lunch we had, which I agreed to because it was a small amount, but I still felt a little uneasy about it. At this point, I was feeling like she was taking advantage of my willingness to help, and I started to feel resentful. I had been there for her emotionally and financially, but it felt like there was always a reason for her to need money, and it wasn't helping her long-term situation. It felt like a pattern. Fast forward another month, and Rachel contacted me again. She told me that her car had broken down, and she couldn't afford to fix it, so she was asking me to lend her another $600. I was furious. I had already lent her money once, and she still hadn't paid it back. I felt like I had been more than generous with my help, and now she was asking for even more. I took a deep breath before responding, trying to stay calm. I told her that I couldn't lend her any more money and that I needed the money she already owed me back before I could even consider helping again. I told her that I understood things were tough, but that I couldn't continue to put myself in a position where I was financially strained to help her. I also told her that I felt like she wasn't taking her financial situation seriously and that I was getting tired of being the one to bail her out every time something went wrong. I told her that it was starting to affect our friendship and that I didn't want her to take advantage of my kindness. Rachel was hurt by my response. She said that she understood, but that I was being unfair. She reminded me of all the times she had helped me in the past and how I had always been able to lean on her for support. She said that this wasn't about her taking advantage of me, but that she was in a difficult place and just needed some help. She also said that I was being cold-hearted for refusing to help a friend in need. I tried to explain that I wasn't refusing to help because I didn't care about her, but that I simply couldn't afford to keep lending her money, especially when I was struggling financially myself. The conversation ended on a tense note, and since then, Rachel hasn't reached out much. I tried to contact her a couple of times to check in, but she's been distant, and I can tell she's upset with me. I've been reflecting on the whole situation, and I feel torn. On one hand, I know I was right to set boundaries because I can't keep lending money I don't have. On the other hand, I feel like I might have been too harsh, and I wonder if I should have helped her out just this once more, given how tough her life has been. I've always been there for her, and I don't want to lose our friendship, but at the same time, I can't afford to keep enabling this cycle of asking for help without seeing any real change. So, AITA for refusing to lend my friend money after she repeatedly asked? Or should I have helped her out one more time, given her situation? AITA for refusing to help my sister pay off her debt after she used my money to buy a car? I, 29M, have a younger sister, Megan, 25F, who I've always tried to look out for. Growing up, we weren't super close, but we always had each other's backs. As adults, we've built a pretty good relationship, though there have been times when I've had to set boundaries, especially when it comes to money. I'm not rich by any means, but I've always been good with my finances. I have a steady job, live within my means, and have saved up a nice little emergency fund over the years. Megan, on the other hand, has struggled a bit with managing her finances. She has a tendency to spend impulsively and has found herself in debt a few times. She's always come to me for help, and up until now, I've always been there for her, whether it was lending her some money, helping her budget, or offering advice. A few months ago, Megan came to me again. She had just got a new job, and it was a great opportunity with decent pay. She was excited about it and told me that she was going to buy a car. The thing is, Megan didn't have the cash to buy the car outright, and she wasn't eligible for a loan from the bank because of her poor credit history. Instead, she wanted me to co-sign the loan for her. She promised me that she could afford the payments with her new job and that she wouldn't let me down. She said that she was really excited to have her own car and that it would make her life so much easier. I agreed to co-sign the loan because at the time, I trusted her and wanted to help. Fast forward to a couple of months ago, Megan started calling me constantly, asking for help with her bills. She told me that her new job wasn't going as well as she had hoped, and she wasn't able to make the car payments. I knew things had been a little tough for her, but I didn't realize how bad things were. She had fallen behind on the loan payments, and the lender was threatening to repossess the car. I was frustrated, but I told her that I could help her cover the payment for this month, but I couldn't keep doing it indefinitely. I explained that I had my own bills and responsibilities, and that I couldn't afford to keep bailing her out. I told her she needed to find a more sustainable solution. Instead of taking responsibility for her situation, Megan became defensive. She told me that I didn't understand how hard things were for her, and that she had been doing everything she could to make ends meet. I sympathized with her, But I also told her that it wasn't my responsibility to pay for her mistakes, especially when she had made a choice to buy an expensive car she couldn't afford in the first place. A week later, Megan came to me with another request. She told me that she couldn't make the payment this month, and the loan was about to go into default. She asked me if I could pay off the entire loan. I was shocked. She didn't just want me to help her with one more payment. She was asking me to cover the full amount of the loan, $15,000. I told her absolutely not. I explained that I had already helped her out and that I wasn't in a position to pay off her debt. Megan didn't take it well. She started crying and saying that she would lose the car and that it would ruin everything for her. She told me that if I didn't help her, she would be stuck in a financial hole that she might never recover from. I sympathized with her situation, but I stood firm. I explained that it wasn't my fault she had gotten herself into this mess, and that paying off her debt wasn't going to solve the underlying issues with her spending habits. I told her that I couldn't enable her behavior any longer, and that she needed to take responsibility for her choices. This didn't go over well. Megan started accusing me of being selfish and not caring about her. She said that I was choosing money over family, and that I didn't understand what she was going through. She claimed that I had more than enough money to help her, so there was no reason for me to say no. She went as far as to say that I was acting like I didn't have the money when I obviously did. She compared me to our older brother, who had given her a small loan in the past when she needed it, and she said that I was a better brother than me. I was hurt by what she said, but I tried to explain to her that this wasn't about me not caring about her. It was about me having boundaries when it came to my finances. I told her that I wasn't going to sacrifice my own financial stability for her irresponsibility. She said that if I really loved her, I would help her out, and that she would never ask me for help again if I didn't pay off the loan. I told her that was her decision, but I still wasn't going to help. Since that conversation, things have been really tense between us. Megan hasn't spoken to me much, and when she does, it's usually just brief, awkward exchanges. She's been posting passive-aggressive things on social media, like some people will never understand what it's like to struggle, and I guess family doesn't always have your back when you really need them. I've tried reaching out to her, but she hasn't responded. Our parents have also gotten involved, and they've been pressuring me to help her out. They say that she's going through a tough time and that I'm being too harsh. They argue that families should help each other, and that I'm not being a good brother by refusing to step in. I feel torn. On one hand, I know I did the right thing by standing up for myself and not letting her take advantage of me. But on the other hand, I feel guilty that I might have pushed her away at a time when she really needed help. I also feel like my parents are siding with her, which makes me feel even more isolated in this decision. So, AITA for refusing to help my sister pay off her debt after she used my money to buy a car? AITA for refusing to let my parents meet my girlfriend because of her past? I, 30M, have been dating my girlfriend, Olivia, 28F, for a little over a year now, and everything between us is great. We've traveled together, met each other's friends, and even talked about our future. I'm in love with her, and I truly believe she's the one for me. But there's one thing that's causing a lot of tension between me and my family, and I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong. My parents are very traditional, and they have very specific views about what they want in a partner for me. They've never outright told me who I should or shouldn't date, but they have very clear expectations. They want someone who is polished, has a good family background, and is, for lack of a better word, presentable. It's important to them that the person I'm with fits into their social circle and is someone they can introduce to their friends without feeling embarrassed. Over the years, I've seen them subtly push me away from certain people because they didn't meet their standards, even when I was happy with those relationships. But this time, it's different. Olivia has a past. It's something she's been upfront about since the beginning of our relationship. She grew up in a rough neighborhood and had a difficult childhood. Her family wasn't supportive, and she got involved in some bad situations when she was younger. She made a lot of mistakes in her teens and early 20s. She got into drugs, got arrested a couple of times, and had a string of toxic relationships. But the key thing here is that she's changed. She's been sober for 4 years, she's got a stable job, and she's worked really hard to build a life for herself. I admire her resilience and her ability to turn things around. She's a strong, independent woman, and she's done the work to heal from her past. The issue started when I told my parents about Olivia. I was excited to introduce them to her, thinking they'd appreciate her for who she is now. But their reaction was not what I expected. They were immediately put off. They asked a lot of questions about her past, specifically about her time in jail and her drug use, and it was clear they weren't interested in hearing about how much she had changed. They said they needed time to get to know her better before they could make any judgments, but I could tell they were skeptical. After that conversation, my mom made a comment about how Olivia wouldn't fit in with their social circle. My dad said he didn't want me bringing someone with that kind of history into our family. I was upset, but I didn't let it show. I told them that Olivia had made a lot of positive changes in her life and that I loved her for who she was now, not her past. They didn't seem convinced, and that's when the tension started. Over the past few months, they've been constantly asking about Olivia, where she's from, who her family is, what her childhood was like. They've asked me to invite her over for dinner, but every time I bring it up with Olivia, she gets anxious and uncomfortable. She's not ashamed of her past, but she doesn't want to be judged for things she's worked hard to overcome. I've talked to Olivia about my parents' views, and she told me she felt like they would never accept her because of her past, and she didn't want to subject herself to that kind of judgment. She said she would rather stay away from them than have them look down on her or make her feel inferior. I get where she's coming from. She's been through a lot, and she's worked so hard to rebuild her life. The last thing she needs is for people to hold her past against her, especially when she's not that person anymore. Here's where things get tricky. My parents have started to put pressure on me, telling me it's time to introduce Olivia to them properly. They've even gone so far as to say that they would love to meet her if she's really the one for me. I know they're trying to nudge me into bringing her over, but I can't in good conscience do that if it means putting Olivia in a position where she might feel uncomfortable or judged. I've told my parents that I don't want to bring her into an environment where she's going to feel like an outsider. They didn't like that answer and accused me of letting her drive a wedge between me and my family. They said that if Olivia is important to me, I should be willing to make sacrifices and let her meet them, and that I shouldn't let her past be an issue. I've had a few heated discussions with my parents about this, and they keep insisting that I'm choosing Olivia over them. They've even suggested that maybe Olivia isn't the right person for me if she can't handle meeting my family. They've hinted that they think I should break up with her and find someone more suitable who they would approve of. This has put me in an incredibly difficult position because I know my parents want what they think is best for me, but I also know Olivia is the person I want to be with. I haven't broken up with Olivia, and I don't plan to. I love her, and I believe that people should be accepted for who they are, not judged for their past mistakes. But I also don't want to lose my family. I've tried to explain this to them, but they don't seem to get it. The last conversation we had ended with my dad telling me that if I couldn't introduce them to Olivia, it would be hard for them to support my relationship with her. They didn't explicitly say they'd cut me off, but the implication was clear. So now I'm at a crossroads. Olivia doesn't want to meet my parents, and I don't want to pressure her into doing something that will make her feel like she's being judged. But at the same time, I don't want to alienate myself from my family. I feel like I'm being asked to choose between them and the woman I love, and I don't know if that's fair to either of them. I've been trying to set boundaries with my parents, but they're not backing down, and the stress is starting to affect my relationship with Olivia too. I love both my parents and Olivia, and I'm trying to find a balance, but it's really hard. So, AITA for refusing to let my parents meet my girlfriend because of her past? Or should I have pushed harder for Olivia to meet them and hoped they'd eventually accept her? AITA for not letting my roommate bring her boyfriend to live with us after he lost his job? I, 25M, have a roommate, Chloe, 26F, who I've been living with for about 2 years now. We get along pretty well, and everything has been relatively peaceful. We both have our own lives and spaces, but also share common areas, like the kitchen and living room. We've had our moments, like everyone does, but overall, it's been a good arrangement. That is, until recently, when Chloe's boyfriend, Derek, 28M, lost his job and things started to get complicated. Derek has always been around. Chloe and Derek have been dating for about a year, and while they're not super public about their relationship, I knew about him long before he lost his job. He would come over on weekends, or sometimes during the week, but it was never an issue because he would leave after a few hours. They'd hang out in her room, or sometimes they'd use the living room if they were watching a movie. Honestly, I didn't mind it. Chloe had always respected my space, and I had no reason to complain. However, things took a turn when Derek lost his job. He'd been working for a small tech company, and with the economy taking a hit, the company downsized and let him go. Chloe came to me a few days later and explained the situation. She was upset, but she was optimistic, saying that Derek was looking for work and that things would work out soon. I understood. The job market is tough and layoffs happen. I sympathized with him, but then Chloe told me that Derek would be staying at our place until he found a new job. At first, I wasn't entirely sure how to respond. I knew that Derek was a good guy and that Chloe was trying to be supportive, but I was also concerned about how this would affect our living situation. I told Chloe that I didn't have a problem with him staying for a few days, but I would need some clarity on the long-term plan. Chloe assured me that it would only be temporary, and Derek would be looking for work every day. She promised he wouldn't be a burden and that he would help with rent or other expenses once he got back on his feet. I reluctantly agreed. While I wasn't thrilled about it, I trusted Chloe, and I didn't want to seem like a jerk when she was trying to help her boyfriend. At first, it wasn't too bad. Derek would stay in Chloe's room most of the time, only coming out for meals or when we were all hanging out in the living room. He wasn't demanding, and he kept to himself, so I didn't mind too much. But as the days turned into weeks, I started to feel uncomfortable with the situation. Derek wasn't actively searching for a job like I had expected. Instead, he was spending most of his time on the couch playing video games, watching TV, or napping. I was still working full-time and was the only one paying rent, and it started to feel like I was supporting two people. I don't mind helping out a friend or a loved one in a tough spot, but this felt like more than I had signed up for. I brought it up to Chloe a couple of times. I told her that I understood Derek was going through a tough time, but I was feeling overwhelmed by the situation. I asked if he was actively looking for jobs, and she would always tell me that he was taking a break from the job search because he was stressed. I understood needing a break, but after a month of not seeing him make any progress, I started to get frustrated. On top of that, he hadn't contributed a single dollar to rent or utilities, despite Chloe's earlier promise that he would help out once he was settled. Eventually, I reached a breaking point. I came home one evening to find Derek lounging on the couch, watching TV, while Chloe was in the kitchen. I tried to make small talk with Derek, but he barely acknowledged me. When I asked if he had made any progress with finding a job, he gave me a half-hearted response, saying he'd looked around a little bit, but was taking things slow. Meanwhile, Chloe wasn't saying anything to defend me, and I felt like she was letting the situation go on without taking my concern seriously. I told Chloe later that night that I wasn't comfortable with Derek staying with us any longer. I told her that I felt like he wasn't making an effort to improve his situation, and I was worried about the financial strain it was putting on me. I also said that it was starting to feel like I was being taken advantage of. I told her that if Derek wasn't actively working toward getting a job and contributing, I couldn't continue living like this. Chloe got upset. She said I was being unfair and that I didn't understand the pressure Derek was under. She said he had already been feeling down about losing his job and that the least I could do was give him some space to relax and figure things out. She also mentioned that he was still going through some personal stuff and wasn't ready to jump back into the job market just yet. I told her I was sympathetic, but I couldn't keep carrying the financial burden of having another person in the house who wasn't contributing. We argued for a while, and I could tell Chloe was getting defensive. She said that if I couldn't handle the situation, maybe it was time for me to move out. I was taken aback by this. I told her that I had been more than understanding, but I couldn't keep putting myself in a position where I felt like I was supporting two people. She accused me of being selfish and not caring about her or Derek's situation. I felt like she was blaming me for wanting my home to be a comfortable and sustainable place to live. The next day, Chloe came to me and said she had talked to Derek, and he understood how I was feeling. She said he was going to start looking for a job more seriously, and she promised that he would contribute more to the house once he found work. I agreed to give it more time, but I made it clear that if things didn't change within the next few weeks, I couldn't continue living like this. Fast forward to a couple of weeks later, and nothing has changed. Derek is still on the couch, still not looking for work, and still not contributing. I'm starting to feel more and more frustrated, and I'm really considering having a serious conversation with Chloe about my living situation. I've been patient, but I'm starting to feel like I'm being taken advantage of, and I'm not sure what else to do. I know Chloe is in a tough spot too, and I don't want to seem like a bad friend. But I also don't want to be put in a position where I'm supporting someone who isn't even trying to help themselves. I don't want to kick Derek out, but I'm getting to the point where I feel like I have no other option. So, AITA for not letting my roommate's boyfriend stay at our place any longer because he's not contributing or looking for a job. Or should I be more understanding and give them more time? AITA for not helping my brother after he put me in an awkward position with his financial mess. I, 27M, have a younger brother, James, 24M, who has always been a bit of a free spirit. He's had a rough time finding a career path and has bounced around from job to job, never really committing to anything for too long. He's always been good at charming people, and while he can be fun to hang out with, I've had to help him out financially more times than I can count. Growing up, I was the more responsible one, the one who got good grades, stuck to a plan, and made sure things were in order. James, on the other hand, was always the one who relied on the goodwill of others to get by, which included me more times than I would have liked. Last month, James called me up and asked if I could help him out with a financial situation. He told me that he had gotten himself into some pretty serious debt. Apparently, he had been borrowing money from various friends and family members to cover his rent and living expenses, but the amount had gotten out of hand. He said that he didn't know who else to turn to and that he was really embarrassed by the whole situation. He asked if I could lend him $5,000 to pay off some of his debts and help him get back on his feet. He promised that he would pay me back as soon as he could, and I believed him, as I've always been there for him when he needed help. I was hesitant, but I ultimately agreed to lend him the money. My thinking at the time was that he was my brother, and I wanted to help him avoid ruining his relationships with other people who had already given him money. I made it clear that I couldn't afford to give him the full amount without putting myself in a difficult position, but I'd be willing to help him with a portion of what he needed. James seemed grateful, and I transferred the money to his account, hoping that this would help him turn things around. The next few weeks were uneventful. James didn't call me every day or anything, but I assumed he was using the money responsibly and starting to manage his finances better. However, things took a turn when I found out that James had actually used the money I gave him not to pay off his debts, but to buy a new laptop and some gaming gear. He had posted a photo of himself with his new items on social media, and I immediately recognized the laptop and gaming setup. I was furious. I couldn't believe that he had taken the money I gave him, meant to help him out of his financial mess, and spent it on things that weren't necessary at all. I called him up to confront him, and when he answered, I asked him flat out why he had spent the money on gaming equipment instead of paying off his debts. He seemed taken aback at first, then quickly tried to justify it by saying that he was stressed out and needed something to distract him. He claimed that the laptop would help him find a better job, and that the gaming equipment was just a small thing to keep him sane while he figured things out. I was livid, and I told him that it was completely irresponsible and selfish to use the money for personal luxuries when he was in so much debt. I reminded him that I didn't have that kind of money to just give away, and I expected him to be more responsible with it. James apologized profusely, but it didn't feel sincere. He said he would sell the laptop and gaming gear to pay me back, but I didn't believe him. I had heard these kinds of promises before, and I knew they rarely amounted to anything. To make matters worse, James didn't even offer to give me the money back right away. Instead, he said that he would pay me back when he could, but didn't have a specific timeline. At that point, I realized that I had made a huge mistake by lending him money in the first place. A couple of days later, things took an even worse turn. I found out that James had gone out and gotten a new credit card. Apparently, he had been approved for a card with a decent limit and had started using it to cover his living expenses and to buy even more things he didn't need. This new credit card debt wasn't something he had mentioned to me when he asked for the loan, and I felt completely blindsided. I couldn't believe that he was digging himself deeper into financial trouble when he still owed me money and hadn't even attempted to pay it back. I tried to talk to him about this new development, but he got defensive. He told me that he didn't want to be lectured and that he was just doing what he had to do to get by. I tried explaining that his actions were only going to make his situation worse and that he needed to stop digging himself into a hole. But he just shrugged it off and told me that it wasn't my business how he managed his finances. I felt completely disrespected, and I started to realize that James didn't truly appreciate the help I had given him. It felt like he was taking advantage of me, and I was done enabling his behavior. After this conversation, I stopped talking to James for a while. I was angry and didn't want to get caught up in any more of his financial mess. I didn't want to keep being his safety net every time he screwed up. But a week later, I received a call from him, and he was in full crisis mode. He told me that he was being contacted by debt collectors for the money he owed on the credit card, and his rent was overdue again. He asked if I could lend him more money to help him get out of the hole he was in. I immediately said no. I told him that I had already helped him once, and I wasn't going to keep bailing him out. I reminded him that he needed to take responsibility for his own financial decisions and that I wasn't going to enable his bad habits anymore. James didn't take that well. He called me selfish, said that I didn't care about him, and that I was just like everyone else who only cared about money. He accused me of being a bad brother and said that I wasn't supportive when he needed me the most. I tried to explain that I was trying to help him in the long run by not enabling his poor decisions, but he wasn't listening. He hung up on me, and I haven't heard from him since. Now, I'm left wondering if I did the right thing. I know I shouldn't feel obligated to keep helping someone who clearly doesn't appreciate it, but part of me feels guilty. James is my brother, and I hate seeing him struggle. But at the same time, I feel like I've been taken advantage of, and I'm tired of him constantly asking for help without making any real effort to change his behavior. So, AITA for refusing to help my brother after he put me in an awkward position with his financial mess. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.